Well, if you've been around recovery circles long enough, you've probably heard the terms white-knuckling and sobriety thrown around a lot. Sometimes you even hear someone say something like, I had a bunch of clean time previously, but looking back, I actually think it was more white-knuckling than it was actual sobriety or serenity. So is there a difference? Is there a difference between white-knuckling and these terms sobriety, serenity? If so, what is it? Today we explore that topic on Finding Traction. Welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, guys, it's great to be back with you. Let me just say, if you're looking for some material to help focus your discussions, maybe with an accountability partner, maybe you have a group of guys and you're going, we really want to dive into some of these topics. I really want to encourage you to check out something called the Finding Traction video course. It's 52 weeks. That's 52 15-minute videos. And each video comes with a worksheet. And lots of times guys go, I like meeting with guys, but after a while, I feel like we're spinning our wheels or we're not making any real progress. And so maybe you're with a group of guys and you're done doing a book study or looking for something. I'd really encourage you to check out the Finding Traction video course. You can find out about it on the website, bandofbrothers.care. And if you go there under the resources and then Finding Traction, you'll be able to watch video 1. It's called Houston, We Have a Problem. And that will just give you a bit of an idea as to how you can get that. So anyways, it's just something that I've got guys who've done that. Some individuals, guys get together. I've had churches that have done it. A counseling group has done it. People in the UK, Australia, North America. So it's something that people are finding helpful. And especially now, whole quarter 1, which is the first 13 weeks, have been reformatted. And I feel really excited about the material there. So check it out. It's also on YouTube under my name, Vern Tomke. You can see the first lesson example there if you are still using YouTube. So there you go. Excuse me. So let's talk about these two terms, the term white-knuckling, and then these two terms on the other side we're going to call maybe sobriety or serenity, and ask, is there a difference? And if so, what is it? And I think those terms actually do describe two completely different experiences in recovery. It's the way I look at it is white-knuckling is a real thing, and it's something people looking back, they go, what? That was my experience in recovery. And other guys go, what? Maybe that was my experience, but I transitioned to something that was more like serenity, like recovery serenity. And that's a whole different experience. Now, most of you would say, I think I want the second experience. Just a minute to take those two terms. Is there a difference between, let's say, sobriety and serenity? Now, I know different people have talked about different ways of distinguishing. This is my very simple distinction between those two terms. I see sobriety as the path of recovery. I see serenity as all of the good fruits we can experience in walking in recovery. Things like peace, joy, contentment, those kind of things. That really feels like serenity to me. But we're here more to talk about those two positive terms, serenity and sobriety, and we're here to contrast them with the different version of recovery that we're going to call white-knuckling. So here's how I would make the distinction between white-knuckling and sobriety serenity. So the first way I would say there's a distinction is based on how we approach this whole idea of willpower. You see, white-knuckling is all about and based on my willpower. How long can I hold out and not do something that I want to do? That is white-knuckling. I remember back in elementary school, there was this countrywide fitness contest, and where you had a whole variety of different tests. There were different races. There was the shuttle run. There was squat thrusts. And then there was this one super cruel exercise called the flexed arm hang. You know, there was a bar up high above you, and you would pull yourself up like a chin up, but they called it the flexed arm, and you would hold on there as long as you can. Now, I remember, I might just be BSing myself, but I swear that I remember that I hit a time of 103 seconds. Again, it's stuck in my mind. Maybe it's illusions of grandeur. I don't know. But I somehow remember back in grade 3 and 4, I held on to this bar for 103 seconds. You know how the end of the flexed arm hang always is. It always ends the same. You know, your arms begin to shake. There's a little tremor, and then they begin to shake. Your grip begins to slowly weaken. Your fingers begin to separate, you know, and your whole body's shaking, and you're holding on until the point of exhaustion, and then you just drop. Yes, what a great picture of white-knuckling it. And that is not, well, that's white-knuckling, but most of us would say that's not a good picture of what we want, you know, our sobriety or serenity to look like. I would say sobriety, serenity is more based on creating the right conditions or environment for success. See, this is where Benjamin Hardy's book, Willpower is Not Enough, is perfectly tailored to this distinction. Again, going back, white-knuckling focuses on willpower and having enough willpower, whereas sobriety and serenity is more on creating the right conditions for willpower to you know, either not be necessary or the right environment for success. So I see that as a big distinction between experiencing your recovery as white-knuckling it or an experience of serenity. The second major distinction that I would say between white-knuckling and sobriety serenity is based on how we draw the circle around us. You see, white-knuckling it is defined, and we define our recovery in strictly personal and individualistic terms. It's my recovery, my sobriety, what I can achieve. Whereas I think real sobriety and serenity is defined and understood within the context of community. You know, there's an old recovery saying that says, well, we can do what I can't. You see, if I draw the circle of my recovery really tightly around me, eventually I will feel like I'm back on that flexed arm hang alone. Maybe to change our word picture, but if I draw a broader circle, I can actually have people around me holding me up on that bar, and I can do, you know, and they can take the weight off those flimsy arms of mine, right? So it has to do, the difference between white-knuckling and sobriety serenity has to do with how tightly we draw the circle around us. A third distinction I would make is, I think it can be, you can make a distinction based on what we still continue to carry. The last podcast that I did was entitled When Resentment Comes Knocking. And white knuckling is when we seek to have the maximum change by doing as few things as possible, or by the maximum change and still hold on to as many things as possible. For example, if you talk to someone in recovery, and I see this different times in talking with guys who are starting out, they're still carrying around all sorts of beliefs or beefs or disappointments or resentments that they have. And if you meet somebody like that, or you're like that, and they're still very much focused on things like resentments or frustrations with them or the world around them or people around them, you are looking at someone who is white-knuckling it. See, white-knuckling is when you still are trying to maintain control over every aspect of your life and your recovery. When we were young, the kids were really young, we would go out for a drive sometimes, and we would give the 3 young kids in the back white paper pie plates. And they would, of course, pretend that they were actually controlling the direction of the car, right? And that's white-knuckling it, when we have our pie plate trying to control the direction of the car, the people around us, and trying to essentially make that our definition of success. See, on the other hand, sobriety, serenity is characterized, and we begin to experience it through this word, and the word is surrender. See, surrender is the way we enter into recovery, and surrender is the way that we continue into it. For example, if you have a relapse and you're covered and you feel all sorts of shame, well, what do? If you are white-knuckling it, you hide. You're not willing to have expose your shame to other people. Surrendering says, you know what? I have nothing to fear. I have nothing to prove. I have nothing to hide. And you're willing to surrender that to people around you. Surrender is when we lay down all the ways we think that recovery should be done. Surrender is when we lay down what we think others should do around us to make our recovery work. Surrender is when we lay down our expectations around how long it should take and the markers along the way. So, based on control versus surrender, resentments versus release, you have right there a major distinction between white-knuckling it and experiencing sobriety in a way that leads you into serenity. Here's the fourth one I would say, and this is there's a major distinction in white-knuckling it versus sobriety, serenity, based on what we focus on. White-knuckling it is when we start this thing, we're simply focused on how do I stop looking at porn. And I understand that, I get that, because we've had this big anvil, this big person, this big gorilla stepping on our toes, causing all sorts of pain. And that is kind of how we start this journey. That's what motivated us to start down this road of recovery. Right? And sometimes there's another word that's used, abstinence. And that is kind of almost a white-knuckling in terms, because abstinence is simply, the idea of stopping a behavior. That feels a lot like white-knuckling it to me. That is the sole thing that we're focusing on. How do I stop doing this? How do I get this pain out of my life? But if we're going to move to serenity and sobriety, then we have to ask ourselves, not just, I want to stop a behavior, but I want to ask myself, what unmet needs am I trying to meet that is behind this porn use? What pain am I trying to medicate? What trauma am I trying to cover over? That statement that we've said so many times, porn is not your main problem, it's just your favorite solution. Well, that's the sort of thing that leads us towards true sobriety and serenity. We're not just asking, how do I stop looking at porn? We're asking, why do I look at porn? And when you start asking those kind of questions, then you start to make the transition from white-knuckling it to true sobriety and serenity. If you go back to an earlier podcast I did, I think it was episode 101, I spoke about different stages of recovery. And I used the example of when your car, your engine light comes on and your engine is running roughly. And you take your car in to a mechanic. And step one is often how we get into recovery, is where we simply are trying to turn the engine off. And that's an important step, and it can feel like white-knuckling it. But step 2 is actually about running a diagnostic on it and saying, well, why did the engine light come on? What does the engine light reveal? Of course, with the newer car, I had to do this recently. You can, plug a computer up and you will get an error code. Wouldn't that be great if that's all we had to do with our recovery? Find that thing, plug in the computer, come up with an error code, and deal with that error code. Boy, it would be so simple, right? So, again, step 1 in that process is simply, okay, I'm trying to turn off this habit. But step 2 is working on what is behind and what is the solution I'm looking for. So that's a distinction I would make. Here's another way I would make a distinction between white-knuckling it and those twin words, sobriety and serenity. I would say it's based on how we approach personal change. And again, this is a little similar to the last one, but I want to take it in a bit of a different direction. Again, white-knuckling it is focused primarily on our problematic behavior. This behavior has to stop. This behavior is not right. This behavior makes my wife, fiance, angry with me, right? I'm concerned about my behavior. That is a white-knuckling kind of approach. But real sobriety, serenity goes beyond our behavior and asks the question, who do I want to become? What do I want my character, and how do I want it to change and develop? Right? That's why if you've done any work with the 12 steps, you'll see far more emphasis as you move through the steps to start dealing with your character. Your behavior arises from your character. That's the old, Jesus words of good fruit, good tree, bad fruit, bad tree kind of thing. Step 6 puts it this way. It talks about we are entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. So they go right to the heart. It's our character that matters. And then step 10 is a furthering of that idea. It talks about this idea. It tells us and encourages us to take a personal inventory. And when we are wrong, to promptly admit it. Right? Those steps are a lot deeper and go beyond simply stopping a behavior. They're all about taking the steps of self-awareness, coupling them with humility, and then continuing the healing and growth process. That's recovery. That's sobriety. That's serenity. So, only interested in your behavior? That's a version of white-knuckling it. More interested in who you are becoming, your character, that is moving into the area of serenity and sobriety. Here's another distinction. I would say it comes down to how we choose to see the purpose of our recovery. See, white-knuckling continues along the idea that the circle is tightly drawn around us. The purpose of my recovery is for me solely to obtain and have a better life, or less porn or less pain in my life. True sobriety and serenity asks the question, how does my sobriety affect others? How can I be a source of service and encouragement to other people? right? So it goes far beyond us. And when we go beyond ourselves, we begin looking out and helping who others can learn from my story. How else can I encourage people? Then all of a sudden, we find ourselves moving out of white knuckling into actually experiencing true sobriety. Now, I guess you could ask, is it probably common that most of us start our recovery in a fairly white knuckling kind of way? I think that's probably pretty realistic. You got to start somewhere. You start where you start. It is what it is, right? And I don't go around pegging guys. Oh, well, you are, experiencing true sobriety. Oh, you're white knuckling. I don't go around pegging guys in that way, because we're all on a journey, right? And but I think on this journey, but I also encourage guys, as I work with guys in coaching and as we're in groups, we do the traction course in my groups. And what happens is I find guys over time, it's amazing sometimes when we do a 52-week video lesson together, I'm amazed at the difference that happens in guys from when we start, week 3, 4, 5, and then we get into quarter 3 or quarter 4. I see guys making huge transitions from white knuckling it to actually beginning to grow into being different people. Yeah, I mean, sure, some of their behaviors have changed a lot. Most of guys' behaviors have changed a lot by just the experience of being with a committed group of guys and experiencing that group dynamic. But what's more important and exciting to me is see guys changing. That really, because then they're starting to not only stop their behaviors, but then they're starting to experience the fruits of sobriety, which is what we've called serenity. Well, guys, I hope that gives some ideas. Maybe the next time you're at the gym doing chin-ups or on the flexed arm hang, you'll remember that white knuckling is how you started this thing. But I hope we all can make that transition to experience the benefits of serenity. We'll see you next time.